Welcome to the Independent Artist Podcast, sponsored by the National Association of Independent Artists.
Also sponsored by Zapplication. I'm Will Armstrong, and I'm a mixed media artist.
I'm Douglas Sigworth, a glassblower. Join us as we explore the topics that affect the lives and livelihoods of art show artists.
Douglas, it's nice to see you again here on the podcast. It's been a couple weeks now since the last time we recorded, and I believe you've got a show under your belt.
Oh my God, I finally left my driveway. I made my way up to Ann Arbor, Michigan, and it was a whole new experience for me. What can I say?
You can tell us whether it was a good show or a burner, for one.
No, it was not a burner.
Nice. Very good.
Maybe I had a burner half hour, but after that, man, things were hopping. They were just rolling along.
You were not on social media gloating at all. The only social media post that I saw was water jetting up through the manhole covers. But,
I tell you, it's like we had it all. I mean, really, we had it all, which Ann Arbor typically is. No, this was a real pleasant surprise. And honestly, I've never been a huge fan of Ann Arbor. It's always one of those shows I feel like I have to do to fill a spot that I kind of like put in the time because I don't want to have a hole in the schedule because it's so much work. It's just, it usually leaves you feeling so worn out, and the sales have always just been okay. But I mean, this weekend was just a total turnaround. There were so many things about it that were all new and different.
Did it just feel like a different show, or is it the fact that we've been gone for a year?
There's a little bit of both in there, but I mean, there was enough different in the sense that it was a 3-day show. The hours were still long, but just having it be 3 days was amazing.
So you did 3 days. It's Thursday through Saturday.
Right.
Okay. So what was it typically? Wednesday through Saturday?
It's changed a lot over the years. For the longest time, it was a Wednesday through Saturday event.
Right.
And then they switched a few years back from a Thursday to Sunday event.
So why did they, I mean, okay, I've only done that a couple times. I know the show pretty well, but do they cut that? Is it so that we can celebrate our Jesus on Sunday? Is that why? Is that not to mock, but I mean, is that why? Is that the reason? Or the churches, do they have a vice grip on?
As far as I know, there was the resistance to have it be on Sunday had something to do with the amount of churches in that neighborhood.
That's a much better way to say it.
But the show is put on by the merchant associations all through Ann Arbor. And so it was bringing bodies into their community and making sales. And I'm hoping that they made what they needed to make in these 3 days, because I've never seen the streets as busy as they were. Because over 4 days and having it be spread out, there were lots of periods in the past where it just felt like a big lull. But this was like streets packed. Like a Fort Worth, actually. A lot like Fort Worth.
Damn. That's awesome. So we're not going to see Kyle Spears putting one of his videos together and posting it on social media with his zombies coming up out of the ground.
I'm guessing not. Maybe he didn't have time.
No, he didn't. That's awesome news. And I heard from you personally on Saturday. The rain didn't seem to hold people back, and that's great.
Yeah, I show up on Friday, and, we had been preparing for this day. You know how we do these shows and it'll say, oh, it's going to rain all day. And you think, well, maybe that band is going to swing north or south and it'll miss us. But no, it was a statewide thing. There was no escaping it. We got up in the morning and it was going to be torrential rain, and it was going to be all day long. So we all get there. We all feel pretty defeated. We're setting up, but kind of doing it slowly because it really didn't seem like there's any rush in the matter.
Right.
And the people who run the show are going through with bullhorns saying, hey, artists, the directors are going to meet at 11 o'clock. If you had your say, do you want to stay open or do you want to close? And all up and down the street, you hear, close it down, close the show. Okay, so that's obviously how the artists felt about it.
Yeah.
11 o'clock comes, we all get this text that says, the show's open, but you have the choice. You can stay or you can go. Well, the tent flaps started dropping one after the other after the other. And I thought to myself, okay, well, I'll probably close up here too, but I'm just going to give it a few minutes because it's such a rigmarole getting all the glass set up. And so before I could get to packing up, I actually started having interest and people walking in one after the other and pulling cash out of their pockets. And before you know it, after a few hours, I had actually a solid, regular day.
That's awesome.
And there was nobody around me. And I thought to myself, now when it's just drizzling and it's the kind of stuff we all sit through and still normally sell in, I'm thinking, well, now's the time we should be open. Well, I looked down the street. I could see the crowds coming to a swell. Or they looked down the original street. We're all closed up and they just turned and they just kept going. So I know a lot of people on State Street and Guild who stayed open. Yeah. They rocked Friday night.
You know what? There's really no telling. I'm glad you had a great day, but I'm probably going to be one of those guys that zips up in the face of torrential downpours. But then again, like you said, I've been at Artisphere when there was 100% chance of rain, and then the sea just parted in the middle, and we had the humidest day I've ever had, but just a killer weekend. Yeah. I think that was like 2019, 2018. I can't remember the last time. But anyway, there's no telling. So congratulations to you. Congratulations to the folks that got some rest. And I hope they blew it out again the next day.
And I mean, it's different than it being stormy. I always run for cover when it's stormy, but my work won't get damaged in rain. And I understand folks you don't want your paintings ruined in a rainstorm. So you need to protect your work. That's a big part of it all.
We work for ourselves. Yeah, we don't necessarily work for the show. Sometimes I think we do work for the show, like I've said in previous episodes, you know, when they have certain hours. Yeah, well, I just want to put out a big thank you to Mo Riley and the other directors because they pulled it together and they gave us a great show. And I'm just so grateful to them. Do they talk to each other when they decide whether they want to keep the show open, like Mo and the director's estate? And I think so, because, what they wrote in the text was that the directors of the shows would be meeting. So, yeah, I think it would be an all-show kind of meeting. I ran into Callie Hopgood, and she said something that's been rattling around my brain now for a couple of days. She brought up this concept called collective effervescence. Have you ever heard of this? It was totally new to me. Is that a Alka-Seltzer? I don't know. I have not. No, but what it is it's this concept. It's a sociological concept. When communities gather together and they find encouragement and enthusiasm from each other through a common experience. We were all off in our homes for a year now. And we all are coming back to shows, and the collectors and the artists are feeling this collective effervescence. It's like this enthusiasm to show up and to acquire art, makes us want to go home and make more art. And that's kind of the thing that kept us going before COVID. If we didn't have a good show or something, it was that response that we got from our work that would keep us going for the next thing, or you know what I mean? It's kind of an interesting thing that it's been keeping me thinking about it and Googling it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I like to think about my business is kind of like a train, and the schedule is like a train track, and I've got to keep, you keep the wheels on. It's like you're running out of money. You got to keep, at least the train is still going. I can get to the next stop. Whereas this, I felt like we were a train with no track last year, and that makes sense. Art train. The art train. I tried something new at the show this time. For the first time back, I took a little bit of Marjolaine's advice from second episode. I spent so much time getting in my head about going out and doing a show again. I feel like I'm one of the last ones. It was like 17 months or something, or 16 months. Yeah, you're the 40-year-old virgin on the circuit. You can't get back out there. So I put all this thought into how am I going to capture these people that leave my booth? Because, Ann Arbor is so big. Sure. And you feel like if you lose them, they're not coming back. So I did a lot of thinking about what she had taught us. And I created a coupon code from my website. Like you said, never say no. I'm not pushing them out of my booth or anything. I'm trying to keep them there as long as I can. Sure. And then if I feel like, okay, they are literally just trying to get the heck out, I hand them a card. And I say, well, here's our card. And on the back is a coupon code for free shipping for 1 week. So if you decide that you can't make it back, or you want to sit on your computer and look a little more closely at what we have to offer,
It's almost like you bought at the show. And my phone's been lighting up for the last 3 days.
You're lying.
I swear to you. It works.
Okay, that's fine. I don't know. I don't know if I could do it still. I tried to and I was like, you know what? I got myself a new book and I'm like, I'm going to collect the emails. I'm going to follow Dahlquist. I'm going to follow Marjolin. I was off my game, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. I want to sell right then.
Well, of course. And obviously a large scale mixed media painter is a whole different game than me selling. My average price point is between $250 and $750.
That's true.
So, you know what I mean? It's a totally different ball game.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm playing that really big long game, and I'm just not sure how to get those people on board. I did collect a couple.
It's clunky. It's clunky getting back to the new way of doing things. And
it is. We've said this several different times about the new way of doing things. I think that's a lot of horse shit. If you're still doing it the way you used to do, I think it still works. It's fine. I think that's great for you. And I think that's great for those guys. I do know the customers that I need to collect the emails on. My mind is fairly open when it gets right down to it and comes to the practice and they're walking out of the booth. A lot of my customers don't even make their decisions until they're standing in front of my booth. Yeah. And then they're talking to their friends and they're like 10 feet away. And then I'm doing that slow backup walk too, because again, I have big pieces. It's a big commitment. You're going to live with it for your life. And so I kind of back up and then it's like, then they turn and walk away. And I don't know whether they're going to go get another glass of wine or a beer and talk about it and come back. I mean, it's the classic be back, but I'm not in the business of chasing somebody down the street and handing them my card.
Right.
So I don't know. I'm a delicate balance between what I'm supposed to do and then what I actually will do. If that makes any sense.
Well, but you get to do what works for you. It's not like us all talking about our different process and stuff doesn't mean that you need to do what other people do. This is what works for you.
Yeah,
if it didn't work for you, you'd come up with a different way to do it.
True. But that being said, I've been a little bit off my game and I'm still trying to figure out how to collect my things. I lost one in Des Moines because I didn't collect his email. If I'd emailed him, if I could follow back, if I had his contact, I would absolutely sell him that piece. But it was like one of these classic be-back things. And he was like, we fired on all cylinders. Our conversation was great. It was deep. Yeah. We had this big conversation about the production value in music of Rick Rubin and the different records that he's produced. I mean, we talked for about an hour.
He was feeling it. He was feeling it.
Absolutely. And he may come back and see me at Cherry Creek. He's a show junkie. He's one of those guys. He comes up from Des Moines and he comes out to Cherry Creek. He goes to Plaza. He goes to St. Louis. So
that's great.
I think I'll catch him. He's mine, though. I was getting ready to describe him. He's the most recognizable guy, but I'm like, yeah, that dude. It's like there's this guy that comes around to One of a Kind in Chicago. Talk about recognizable, and he buys a lot of art, but he's the front man of Toto. He wrote Eye of the Tiger, and he comes around in his purple leather suit, and he looks like just an awesome little cool old guy. Yeah, and he's wearing his purple leather suit, and he's got his glasses on, and he's got his business cards. If he likes your work, he'll drop it, and it's got the Eye of the Tiger on the card. Anyway. Meet all sorts of weirdos.
When he starts to approach, you try not to look too eager. Like you're like, this one's mine, so I'm just going to be all cool about it. Let him come.
Oh yeah, you gotta turn your back. Again, you're the hot girl in the bar. Can't act too eager. Can't get laid when you're horny, Douglas.
Oh man. I've been told that I need to not seem so eager whenever Epic walks by at Madison. I'm giving off a real eager vibe, and you have to play it cool. She's like, just play it cool. If they like it, they'll get it. If they don't, you can't talk them into it. So just chill the fuck out.
You have to. I don't know. Wear loose fitting sweatpants. I don't know. You gotta hide it somehow. I know exactly who you're talking about. Epic they're the big earner in Madison. They have a huge collection of artwork.
Yeah.
And the stories of them making people's years are deep on the circuit.
Yeah. Hey, I want to give a shout out to Terry. Terry's a collector. And she was walking by my booth at Ann Arbor and she says, I recognize your voice. It turns out she listens to the podcast and she says she doesn't miss it. Every Monday when we drop, she listens on her walk. She's not an artist. She's not a show director, but she knows about our show.
Amazing.
And she says she loves artists and loves collecting artwork. And she loves hearing about our process. And it's really inspirational to her. So shout out to Terry. Thanks for listening.
That is very cool. Thank you, Terry, very much. I appreciate you tuning in. That's really rewarding when you talk about those collectors that come to shows and our show junkies. That's what keeps our wheels on for sure.
Yeah.
Hey, Douglas, did you see, I don't know if you do the River Arts show in Memphis, but
every year.
Moving.
Every year do it.
Oh, do you really? How the hell have I not met you? I used
I don't
to
know.
do it every year.
We've been running circles around each other for 20 years, Will.
Weird.
Yeah.
Anyway, they have moved that show a couple of times and they're moving it indoors to the Renaissance Convention Center. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's the same price. You're not paying indoor money like you do at like One of a Kind or ACC. But I don't know. Interesting. I don't think if they can get the advertising out, I don't think it's going to hurt it. Just an interesting tidbit.
Yeah, I sat in the rain and froze many a time at that show. So, I mean, it might be a good move.
Yeah, I don't know why I can't pack correctly for River Arts, but I can't tell you how many different times I've gone to Memphis needing to go buy clothes.
Oh, I have so many raincoats and so many things in my closet. And all it would take is just stuffing it under my seat, for crying out loud. But I somehow get taken by surprise every time.
Yeah, I like to drop it into my little collapsible chair and leave it in there and let it get gum on it or whatever else gradu that I have floating around in my van.
Nice. Well, the good thing about that show is even when they've moved, they always have great crowds, and it's always a destination show. It's not one where people happen upon it because they're going somewhere else. So I believe if they followed it down on the riverfront, they'll follow it to the convention center. So we'll see.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Oh God, no, I'm getting a cramp.
Eat a banana.
Shut the fuck up about those goddamn bananas. I eat bananas at every show, and I still hobble around the room. Does that ever happen to you at breakdown? Every time I get back to the room after breaking down, I'm all ready for bed and I'll just be dozing off, and then I like spring up in the air because I get the worst Charlie horse cramps from breakdown. And I eat the frickin' banana. I do the nun tabs. I drink the pickle juice. I do all the stupid old wives' tales that everybody tells you to do. I stretch. I do all that crap, and I'm still ridiculous.
Yeah, I used to. I don't know why. I haven't gotten a Charlie horse in a long time.
It's like every show for me.
Huh. You just jinxed me. You got to drink your water in Park City, though.
Yeah.
That altitude is no joke.
Yeah.
You know, it was interesting last week, Douglas. I've had a couple of people talk to me about the Daryl Thetford interview, and they were just to kind of approach some of the points that he made, because I thought that it was such a kind of a casual conversation that I had with him, and just very congenial, but he had a lot of pearls. You might apply to Reston, and then you might apply to the Pearl. If you get both of them, the Daryl Thetford method, you're not going to drive all the way from Portland to Northern Virginia.
Right. Well, that's a real clear decision.
Right.
Really what it comes down to is he's telling us to be in the driver's seat and to really look at it with a critical eye and say, which opportunities really are our best opportunities? And if we take one of them away, do we still make up the difference at the other thing? And we really need to be smart about that.
Right. And are you going to be able to sell the things that you sold at one show at the next if you have that inventory? So, or are you going to be able to even sell it to somebody? Are you going to be on your game? Or are you going to be like I was at Bayou and just sitting in my chair on my butt?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I think it's a really interesting way. I think it goes counterintuitive to the way a lot of us think, the way I have over the years, that get the show, do the show, I mean, if you get that dream schedule in June, you feel like you're compelled to do it. If you get Old Town, Lakefront, Des Moines, and Cherry Creek, that's July, but you feel like you're like, here we go. I'm not going to see my family. I'm not, and at what cost? you go do 4 or 5 shows in a row. What's the cost to your well-being? What's the cost to your family? What's the cost to your kids and school? And it's interesting. So it definitely has me rethinking, even though I have a September like that I just kind of have to do. Like you just kind of have to suck it up because I feel like my entire year is crammed into that month.
We have this feast or famine mentality. It's like make hay when the sun shines. We don't want to turn stuff down because what if we didn't sell at this show and then we cut out an opportunity? And it's really all about wanting to make sure we've packed ourselves full enough that at the end of the year, we've made what we need to make. And it is not an easy gamble. It's just not easy.
No, it's not. I mean, what happens if you have 5 in a row and it rains for 3 of them, or a tornado comes and knocks you out at the first show of the year, and then you're sunk. I don't know. It's a gambling business. It's what we do. I mean, it's interesting, Douglas. A lot of times people they only focus on some of the big shows, the ones that people, the big crown jewels. And a lot of times if I don't get Dogwood, I can go do Decatur. I love some of those smaller shows, and sometimes the smaller ones are easier than the big dogs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And sometimes bigger money and less expense. And that's all part of what Daryl's talking about is how it all fits at the bottom line for us.
Agreed. So nice talking with you about that, Douglas, but that brings us to the crux of this show. You got to sit down and talk to Cindy Lerick, which I thought was amazing. I thought she was incredibly generous with her time and really interesting talk.
Yeah. You know what I really admired about what she shared with me was her candor. It's not like she just talked about all the successes she had, because she is a very successful director and has done a lot of good in the industry. But she was very honest about her struggles and really lets us know about what she was up against. And it feels very authentic to me when somebody can honestly just tell you where things were not so easy for them. And it makes me feel like I can relate to them on a certain level.
Yeah. I mean, she's not just big dogging you and just coming in here and being like, hey, these are some of the things that I did. Like Sausalito didn't work. A funny, quick little story. I ran into the Sausalito people on the streets of Park City getting ready to do that show. And they came by and I was like, they came and introduced themselves and they're like, oh, do you ever do this show? And they were kind of recruiting me a little bit, which was nice. But then I was like, oh man, you just hired one of my favorite directors. She's running your show again. Oh, and cool. Tell you what, if you guys listen to her, you'll have one of the best shows in the country again. She's one of the best in the business. And they were like kind of sheepish, like, oh, and I realized later that they'd already parted ways. So it was pretty interesting. So I told Cindy that like after the fact, and she loved it. She was like, oh, yeah, I'm so glad. I was like, yeah, let him cry as I'm walking away.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I loved that about her. And I've had, she talks about the little conversations that she'll have with the different artists that she's coming around. I've had a longer conversation with Cindy at Winter Park than I have at St. Louis or Uptown or any of the other shows she's done. I just feel like she always comes by the show and she's generous with her time. And I just appreciate her being on the scene, whether it's her show or not.
Yes, and she's super relatable. She just wants to sit and chat with the artist and kind of pick your brain and, have a connection.
Exactly. Let's stop kissing Cindy Lerick's butt and get on with the interview.
All right, here we go. Here she is. This episode of the Independent Artist Podcast is brought to you by Zap, the digital application service where artists and art festivals connect.
Hey, Douglas, do you remember what it was like before Zapplication?
Are you talking about back in the day when we applied with slides and red dots at the bottom?
I don't actually know what you're talking about because I'm not 70, Grandpa. Anyway, it's nice not to have to do that again. I remember Cindy Lerick coming up in your interview here was just talking about slides.
And Cindy Lerick said you could imagine it how it's supposed to be right side up and turn your head on the side.
Yeah, that is not Zap's tagline. Imagine it correct. It's just always the right way.
We want to send out our thanks to Zap for sponsoring us this week. It is my distinct honor to welcome Cindy Lerick to the Independent Artist Podcast today. Cindy is a dynamic consultant with a strong record of achievement in diverse areas of event planning, event marketing, and event production. During her 25 years in the art show industry, Cindy excelled in the position of executive director for the Uptown Art Fair, the St. Louis Art Fair, and the Sausalito Arts Festival, as well as co-producer of the Main Street Arts Festival in Fort Worth, Texas. Each of these shows are top-tier events, and under her influence were ranked among the top 10 in the nation, and the recipients of numerous IFEA Pinnacle Awards. Cindy has the reputation of being a fixer who turns around struggling events. She is a founding partner with Zapplication and the very first recipient of the NAIA Modena Distinguished Service Award. Most recently, Cindy is in the process of completing her Master's of Arts in Creative Events Management and has launched her own independent consulting business named The Art of Events, LLC. Cindy, welcome to the Independent Artist Podcast.
Hey, Douglas. Thank you for having me.
You bet. You've been in the business of producing fine art shows for over 25 years. The Uptown Art Fair in Minneapolis was your first art festival, but you weren't hired to run that event. Can you talk a little bit about what brought you there and what your initial role was with the Uptown Association?
I started with Uptown in September of 1996. And prior to that, I ran my own business of running races, road races, triathlons, biathlons. I did timing and productions of those. So I was busy every weekend. And I also worked for a company called Rollerblade. And I did their North American tour, which meant I produced 16 events all over North America. My husband was transferred in 92 or 93. So I was working remotely for Rollerblade, and I was still timing and managing road races. Some of the ones I did was the Honolulu, Los Angeles. I was kind of a weekend warrior for a couple other companies too that did this. And then we came back to Minnesota. My father was sick. He passed away the day I got home. The plan was that I was going to be his caregiver, but that never happened. And so I decided I did not want to do road races. A friend of mine called me and she said, I know you need a change. You just got back. What do you think about the Uptown Association? At that point, I hadn't even been to Uptown that often, maybe once or twice.
Okay.
And so went and interviewed. And the thing that was so exciting for me was there wasn't going to be an event. Well, I got there and I really enjoyed it.
Okay.
The previous director resigned in about April after the jury was done. And this was when we were doing slides, and it was my first experience with a jury. The slides were in these carousels, and I'm like, what are we doing here? And people are turning their head to the side.
Was this before the red dots?
Oh, I think it was supposed to be red dots. And a lot of it was operator error from whoever was putting them in. And I can remember the director going, well, just imagine it the right way up. I'm like, oh God, I would be so embarrassed. So, we went through the jury. This person selected all of the artisans and then literally left. And so it was, I think, in May, they came to me and they said, guess what? You're an event producer. You're going to do the show. And I was like, I'm going to do the show? And my coming in as the executive director wasn't welcomed by a lot of people.
Why is that?
Well, it was because it was change. We were supposed to do office together, but I wasn't allowed to go in the office. For the first 6 months of my Uptown experience as the executive director, I worked out of my car.
That sounds bizarre.
It was bizarre. It was so upsetting when I look back. And it was even more upsetting in my home life because I was paid a retainer from a company to literally sit at home and wait for them to call.
Okay.
Every month I got, this is a long time ago. I got like $4,000 to not do anything, but be available if they called me.
If they needed you. Okay.
Yeah. And so my husband at the time, he's like, you're going to give that up?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, but I need to be involved.
Right.
I need to.
You can't just sit there and have a passive life. You need to be invested and involved in something.
Even though I had lived here And I lived in the Twin Cities and I had established some friends.
Yeah.
I'd been gone for too long that I was out of the circle.
Okay. Yeah.
So I had to reestablish like getting back involved with my friends. It doesn't just happen in the Twin Cities. It doesn't happen anywhere, I know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had to do this event and they kept telling me, well, Cindy, we have to tell you about the art fair. It's the best event in the nation. And I'm like, the one that I saw in August. So I started reaching out to people for sponsorship. And one of my sponsors turned to be mentors, said to me, you really need to get your name out in front of the artisans. And he's like, well, go to the Edina Art Fair.
Mm-hmm.
You just walk in, say, hi, I'm Cindy. I'm the new executive director of the Uptown Art Fair, and just have a conversation. He said, you're known in the running community. Now you got to get known in this community. So I go to Edina on Friday afternoon. Edina's either raining and humid or hot and humid.
Well, yeah, I live in this area, so I do the local shows. And I will say that I've experienced the Cindy Lerick visit. I've experienced it in St. Louis. I've experienced it here in the Twin Cities. And no other show director does that. No one comes and says, hey, we're looking forward to you being part of our show. It's a nice personal touch.
Well, thanks. My first time, it was not the greatest experience.
Okay.
So I walked in and I did not know this person. And I walked up and I had Uptown garb on. I was like, oh, this is what I learned in rollerblade. You look the piece, you walk the walk, you talk the talk.
Okay.
So I'm all decked out in Uptown and I'm like, hi, I'm Cindy. I'm the new executive director of the Uptown Association. And this person just starts screaming at me.
What?
And he's like just so upset about everything in the show. And I remember my eyes are getting bigger and bigger. And in my head, I'm going like, smile and nod, smile and nod.
Take it in.
Don't cry. Don't cry.
It was that bad. Oh,
it was horrid. It was horrid. So I went out of that booth, took a deep breath, and then went to the next booth.
Okay.
And same thing. Not like, oh, nice to see you. Oh, I'm glad to meet you. Thank you for stopping by. Just everything horrid about
or even
the
just
show.
say, hey, I'm glad you're here. I want to tell you a couple things that you could do better. It was like this reaction that was just over the top.
So went to the third one and I could not hold it back. I just started bawling, just crying. The kind of crying where you're and I like got out of there and I went to my car and I had my running stuff, threw on my running hat, threw on my running jacket, called the mentor and said, hey, this is not going good. Yeah. I'm only going to now go and talk to people that have smiles on their face and I'm not telling them who I am. And that was like my intro into the artist world.
Right.
After that, I took what people had said and I just started asking a lot of questions. We had banners that didn't match. People drove from Florida that didn't have spaces, that was oversold to the artisans like an airline. We had people in places like in between these. It was just not conducive.
Well, my first experience with the Uptown was in '93. It was actually my wife and my first date was going to the Uptown Art Fair. This was before we had ever decided we were going to be professional artists. And I remember the layout was nothing like it is now. It was every alleyway, every nook and cranny that you could pop up a tent, there was somebody with no rhyme or reason.
And then the other thing that was intriguing to me, which I find really interesting, is we demanded that the artists be ready to go by noon, but none of our booths were ready to go by noon. I was like so appalled about everything afterwards.
Wasn't one of your first things like to cut down on the amount of exhibitors because it was an insane amount of exhibitors participating?
Well, yeah, I had started to connect with people. It was then I went to the first NAIA meeting in Chicago. Mm-hmm. I kind of come in and listen a lot and ask questions. And so I came back and I said, what if? Because the big thing was income, and which a lot of festivals, if we sell more booze, we get more income.
Right.
And so the first thing I said was, we aren't going to get enough artists because we're not having good sales for many of the artists.
Mm-hmm.
What if I, within 3 years, start getting a title sponsor to cut down the number of exhibitors? And I had worked with an artist advisory group. I was very fortunate. The minute they found out after my little Edina thing that I was going to be the director, a lot of local artisans came and became my advisory group, and they just volunteered to.
Okay.
I'll help you. I'll help you. I'll help you. And I was like, wow. And there are some well-known names. It was Bob Briscoe, Ginny Herzog, Linda Steinworth, Linda Sorum. Just a bunch of them just offered their time to me, which was like, wow, I've never had that. And so then I went to the board and said, I think if we increased the booth fees by $50, but we reduce the number of booths, I think the artists would be good with that.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, there's 525 people trying to get a piece of the pie. Our goal was to get to 250. So that was going to be a big chunk, but we weren't doing it right away. We were slowly going to, and we weren't going to continually increase booth fees. We were going to keep them stable, and then with sponsorship, hopefully get it down.
You took that initial abuse, but then you kept the conversation going with artists to really know, well, what do they need? What will make a good event? And then you could balance that with business sense on honing in on where to start tackling the benchmarks of what will make this show better.
Yeah, I was very fortunate that I had that help and that I listened.
Yeah.
I had an artist group too, a committee group that had been around working with artists for a while. And it took them a while to understand the plan because change is hard. And I was a person who was going to instrument some change for some people who had been there for a long time. And my transition into that group wasn't like easy peasy. It took a while. And I was questioned over everything I was trying to do, from reducing booths to having a more transparent jury.
Right.
You know, they kept saying, well, we're the best show in the nation. And I'm like, you're not. You've been fed a bunch of crap. And I think that's true in the art fair world. You can get an award and then, oh my God, we're the best. But you're only the best to what you can compare yourself to. You don't hear people bragging that they're the worst.
Right. Yeah.
If I was going to do this, I'm kind of that person. I needed to do it the best I could, and I had to have all the information. I'm a lifetime learner. I have to be sure I'm covering all my bases. And so I was just out there searching. I did not like the jury process, so I called people up and said, hi, I want to come and see how your show is juried. I'll volunteer. I'll fly myself in. I will stay, and I'm coming on this date. Right. And I would just show up.
Well, that takes a lot of guts and not a lot of ego either, because sometimes our egos get in the way and they say, I want these people to think I know what I'm talking about. And here you are being willing to say, I don't have the answers. I want to learn from you.
I did that so much. And I still do that. But I did that when I first got there. David Pinson was at Cherry Creek. He was in a business district. I was in a business district.
Okay.
I just called David up and said, can I come to your office and just shadow you?
Yeah.
I didn't know this man at all. I mean, I didn't.
But you saw the parallels between what you do, what he does, and also you kind of aspired to growing Uptown into their model. So it would be beneficial to go check it out.
Yeah. For me, I wanted to be the best we could be. And to do that, I had to set goals and I had to set objectives, and I had to know what was good. I had to understand what the largest stakeholder, the artists, were saying was good. And I couldn't do that if I didn't experience it. So, I mean, I went and worked as a juror. I went to the show and hung around and did some volunteer shifts early on. We went to Coconut Grove when it was hot, and I brought board members. It came back as like, if Cindy asks you to go, I'm going to tell you, you worked the whole time. You're not out partying. And everyone, and it was kind of, I was hurt by that. I remember I'm like, well, we're here to learn. We're not just here to go to great restaurants in Miami and
Right. Well, I get that too. I mean, artists, we are traveling to do these shows, and pretty much anyone who isn't an artist will ask me, "Oh, that's so great. You went to Miami to do a show. Did you just like lay on the beach the whole time?" I'm like, "Actually, I drove in, I set up, I tore down, and I came home. It was a lot of work, and I needed to get home and make more work." So that's right. We work, right? We work.
And I'm pretty intense, I'll be honest. And at dinner, I'd say, okay, you worked volunteers. What did you find out? What were your top 10 takeaways? And everyone's like, dude, just chill out. And I said, by the time we get home, you're going to have it forgotten. And we have a mission. So it became pretty funny. I did get the diehards to go on trips with me. And I also always felt it was really important to bring interns on trips. So they understood. My goal too with Uptown was we would go to shows locally and connect with the artists that were coming to Uptown. It was the same for St. Louis. I did that too. As you said, if I could connect with you before, I'm a person that works better face to face, having a comfortable conversation, the start of a relationship in terms of a friendly relationship. And so for me to spend time going to these shows only benefited me, I felt, and the artisan, because they had a person who they recognized maybe at that show they were at, so they knew who to talk to. And so my interns, you would go to shows. They knew that. They knew if any of the local shows were around, I'd probably give them a day off during the week, because guess what? We're going to be on Saturday at the Minnesota Craft Council.
Well, when a leader is faceless and things aren't going right, then you have the situation that you experienced with the artist just like unleashing on you. But you, when you came on board, became an approachable person where things didn't escalate to that point. It'd be like you formed a relationship where people knew that, well, Cindy's working for us. Cindy's on our side. And if something doesn't appear right, I'll go talk to her about it. And then there could be a conversation instead of it building up this whole negative narrative in somebody's head.
Mm-hmm. And that was really important to me. I wanted to be approachable. I still think I am approachable to a point, but it was important for me to develop that relationship, because I personally couldn't get better at what I did if I didn't have the insight to what was actually going on. And if I was removed from it and just got it secondhand from staff, volunteers, it wasn't going to do me any good. I wasn't going to grow, and the show wasn't going to grow with a personality. And that was important for me. I felt the show needed to have a personality of care. We were always asking the artisans to apply. And once they got in, we're inviting them to our space. So they are guests, and you need to treat them as guests to your home. That was always something I tried to get across. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes it didn't work.
Well, do you feel like working for the Uptown Association too, that was a bigger umbrella than just the art fair? That it was like you're inviting them into your neighborhood. You had initiatives and goals for that area, and we could see a lot of growth in the area, a lot of chic stores and restaurants and whatnot. And so it really changed and evolved along with the art fair at that time.
Yeah, I mean, I made a point of making the 4 neighborhoods, they were very upset about the Uptown Art Fair when I came in. I had a town hall meeting and literally got tomatoes thrown at me.
Really?
So I had to work with the 4 neighbors. Oh yeah, it was horrid. The vendors, in terms of the store owners, the shopkeepers, that Town Art Fair wasn't their most thrilling event. It was to them a problem. So it was bringing all those things together.
Right.
And looking at them from all different points of view.
How did you convince them that an event like this was in the best interest, or it was a positive?
Well, for Uptown, it's fairly simple, because we were in charge of all the streetscape, which means from their door out, the lighting, the snow removal, the manning of the streets, hiring extra beats cops. Things like that. So if they didn't like it, I'd always go, okay, well, during the winter, I guess I won't shovel your walk. And then they're like, what? And I'm like,
The budget is all dry. Sorry about that.
If we aren't producing a good festival, we don't have money, I'll turn off the lights. Just right here, though, because you don't like the festival. No, I was pretty funny about it, but...
You weren't the mob boss. You were a little bit funny about it.
Yeah, I mean, it was fun to see when a kitchen store and a shoe store did better during the art fair than they did during Christmas. Mm-hmm. Or a salon on the outskirts of Uptown changed their hours to be after the fair closed. But some of the reasons why the hours were changed too, like Uptown always stopped at like dusk, which was a weird time in the summer. So we put it at 7 when I was there, and everyone was mad about that.
Like it was too late?
No, it was too early.
Too early? Oh, okay.
Yeah. And the reasoning was because we had all these restaurants in town. Mm-hmm. They were members. So to balance that, if I closed the show down, I had food vendors, but I could still get the guests to go to the restaurants afterwards for dinner. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of finagling and different goals for the association versus different goals for the festival, but they had to meld together.
Okay. Well, I remember you started offering public application jury previews, and I think you even did it back when there were slides too during that process. Is that right? Kind of that transition from the old system to the digital system?
Well, yeah. A part of it was when we did it with slides also is because as artisans, you weren't able to see how your work was being projected. Mm-hmm. You were trusting, one, that the show was projecting them.
Right.
Two, in the manner that you wanted them projected, not turning on their sides, upside down, front and back. The other thing was the competition. You never know who's competing with you.
Well, right. You kind of get a perspective on what you're up against too.
Yeah. And so you could see, and you could come in and watch. Some people would come for the day. Some people would, call and want to know when is ceramics, when is glass, and come and just watch. We started doing a preview the night before. And then if they wanted to come back, they could see how the jurors were reacting or how the process was, that it was fair, it is equitable. Mm-hmm. It wasn't Cindy saying, I really like blue, so everything blue is going to get in. Yeah. It was pretty much, I was a facilitator, not an influencer.
Yeah. It's another example of transparency that you really have implemented in your festivals throughout the years.
Well, and the other thing was, to me, was we say it's about the art, then why are we bringing in personalities? That was really uncomfortable for me. I'm like, no, we're judging their art. You judge the art. We don't need to know anything about the person per se. We need to know about the art and how it compares to the art that was submitted here.
Are you saying when you were overseeing a jury that you would start to see that a bit and you wanted to?
I saw it quite often at different things. And it bothered me. It was uncomfortable for me.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't right.
Yeah.
And I'm a Libra. I'm born with rules and balance and justice, and it wasn't right. Okay. And so it was really hard for me. And one of the things I tried to do, which I did with running and which I've done with most of my life, is what would I feel like if I was in that individual's shoes? Mm-hmm. How would I want to be treated? How would I want to be responded to? And sometimes it was great. I nailed it. Other times it was a complete flop. But
there's the awareness there. There's the awareness piece. So, that's the intention.
Yeah. So
this fairness in jurying, is that what prompted you to get involved in being a founding partner with Zapplication?
Well, I was with when we were going through the process, we were meeting a lot, and this is NAIA needs to take credit for this. They brought the show directors together in a frequent manner. And we were going through, and I had come from the running world where we were all computer, bar-coded, checked, registration. And the computer industry was changing. Technology was becoming more available. So when we were starting to go and meet, we were all looking at a centralized application system. And it was only for registering, like doing your application, and then you'd still have to send your slides in.
Okay.
And I wasn't willing to go there. To me, it was like, we can do this. There's gotta be a way or something that can get their images. So we do not have to have them have 20 sets of slides in and out. Mm-hmm. So I became very involved, Uptown. And at that time, Stephen had been at Main Street, and he was very, very, very involved with this application.
Mm-hmm. Stephen King.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so then he left, and I was co-producing with Jay Downey at the time. So it was about 2002.
So were you co-producing that while you were still at Uptown, or was that
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yes. Yeah, I was. So I had told the board that I was getting bored in Uptown.
Okay.
And then I had the opportunity to do this. And it was kind of in our off season because it was April. So, So I asked the board, I'm like, can I do this? I said, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity that I can be on the inside of another great show, and I can see how things are done and possibly emulate some of those things to Uptown. And we utilized and worked with interns. And I said, it's also an opportunity with young up and coming event managers, for them to see how things are in another world. Cause that's, most people stay in their jobs forever.
Right.
I'm not one of those people. So yes, I was fortunate to do that in both places. And so I was able to convince Main Street to also become one of the 8 shows that were instrumental in getting ZAP moving forward. And Main Street was the first ZAP jury that was done. I can't remember what year it was.
There's a lot of people who in your position would work really hard and improve their job, improve their organization to continue to make their life easier and kind of be a lifer in that. So, you could have stayed at the Uptown and continued growing that show, but you moved on to bigger and better things. You were ready to take on new challenges. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. When I was Uptown, I had goals of what I wanted to do. There are all these goals, and I had accomplished them. Mm-hmm. And I'm the type of person where I'm not good at same old, same old. My first career was in dental hygiene. That's 8 hours of cleaning people's teeth. Honest, it doesn't change from hour to hour. And you have to create your own stimulation of how you make it exciting to go into the next patient.
Yeah.
And so I knew for me, I'm not good at that.
Okay.
I'm not good at, I always say I'm not good at repeat performances.
Okay.
And so I could tell that I wasn't the person to make the next set of changes, that someone else had to be the catalyst to do that. I did what I could do. And I think there comes a point, I had been there in Uptown 11 years.
Yeah.
I wasn't losing my mojo, but internally I was losing my mojo. Mm-hmm. And I had done a lot, and I couldn't see doing it for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
When I started with Uptown, they gave me a year and a half to convert my clients that I was working, my running clients, to not do them. So they gave me a long time to do both pieces. So when they committed to do that for me, I said, I promise you I will do that on the back end.
Okay. So you gave them plenty of notice to kind of get in their mind that you were on your way onto other things. So it wasn't an abrupt.
I even announced it at an annual meeting in 2006.
Okay.
That I was going to be leaving soon. Now would be the time for you to start a search.
Now, did you already have another opportunity planned? Was St. Louis the next step for you, or were you just off?
No, I did not have another opportunity planned.
Okay.
I didn't know where I was going. I just knew for the health of the organization and the art festival, I needed to leave.
Okay. Yeah.
And then I was hired by Seafair, and they are a city celebration for Seattle. And they were looking at adding an art festival. This was in 2007.
Okay.
And they also had athletic events, and they needed someone who could do this too, athletics and art.
Kind of a merging of your past experiences.
Was first hired as the vice president of strategic partnerships or whatever. And I was supposed to develop this event. And then the economy started tanking and they lost all their sponsorship.
All right. Yeah.
I went back to Minnesota and started doing some odds and ends. And I was a consultant with ZAP, showing other shows. I would go to the show and set up the equipment and help them manage that process for his application. And I went to St. Louis. It was an okay experience.
So you ran their jury. You set up their jury for ZAP.
I set up their jury for ZAP and I worked with their staff.
Okay.
And there was an issue. Something happened with the connection and the internet. We finished up. I met some board members, blah, blah, blah. And I went on my merry way. And I got a call. It was late October.
Okay.
It was a call on my phone and it said cultural festivals have said.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh God, what? Oh, they didn't like the show.
Okay. You're bracing yourself for this one, right?
I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, in my head, I kept saying, let them talk. And I'm pacing back and forth in my kitchen on my cell phone. And I'm like, hi, this is Cindy. And it was Laura. And she said, have you ever thought about moving? And I said, well, yeah, I'm okay with moving. She said, well, would you interview for the St. Louis Art Fair? And I was going through a divorce.
Okay.
And I'm like, do I have to get roommates if I move? And she's like, what? I'm
Is
like,
this a paid position?
is it paid? And she's like, well, yeah. I said, do you have benefits? And she said, yes, the package is quite nice. And I'm like, and I was like, okay, then I'll interview. I was like, why did you call me? And they said, well, the board of directors went around to artisans at the show and they asked if there was a director they knew that might move to St. Louis. And I guess my name had come up. And it was a really intense interview. I mean, I think I met with all board members and the mayor and
Wow.
Yeah, just a bunch of people. There was all this like in and out. And then they always on these things, they always have these stupid happy hours afterwards.
And you asked them what their 10 goals were and if they accomplished it that day.
No, I was like, oh my God. And prior to this, I really was concerned, like, are they going to find out that I'm like an imposter? Because I think, I'm a person who has the imposter syndrome quite often.
Okay.
Are they going to find out? What if? So it ended up working out. On your due diligence, they always ask you questions. And so I wanted to see their financials. The only financials they had done by that time were right after the festival. So it looked so good.
Okay.
Because you always have all this money coming in and you never see the money going out.
Yeah.
I wasn't smart enough back then to go look at other old 990s. Didn't know how to quite do that. So I found a place to live and started, and about 5 weeks into it, they really showed me what the fiscal picture was.
This was the other shoe dropping. I mean, you're starting a whole new chapter of your life, relocating, new job, new life as an independent person. And boom, this had to be like a gut punch to see what you just walked into.
It was. I mean, I sat down with the finance committee and said, I don't want to work from home. I will try my hardest to do everything possible to not work from home. I will renegotiate all of our contracts.
Okay.
And it took a while, but I literally had to call and renegotiate everything. And I think a lot of festivals do that. If you're comfortable, you're always using the same person to print the commemorative print. When they were getting charged 5 times what I was getting charged in Minneapolis.
Okay.
And so I called the guy and said, is it on a special paper? Are you doing special ink?
On gold leaf?
Yeah. I'm like, what is this? So I said, well, we're going out to bid. And I'm telling you first, we would like to do work with you. I can't put that forward. It's way out of line.
This is a good example of how you say that when people don't ever leave their backyard and they don't know what's out there, that then they can't really get perspective. So here you come in with some perspective.
Yeah. I mean, and I said, I have to pay bills.
This isn't going to be lasting very long if we keep up debt like this.
And I mean, it was hard. It was really hard. Even changing the jury. They had a 3-person jury that was selected before I came. Mm-hmm. Of course, I'm the newbie. So when I don't like 3-people jury. I think it's too easy for people to go against, 2 against 1.
There can be a spoiler.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I just didn't like it. And so we went into this jury, and I'm used to juries being pretty managed well from all over. Mm-hmm. I'm like, what have I gotten myself into?
Wow.
It was, people were treating people disrespectful. They were ganging up on one juror because they were just had a different viewpoint. And then, it was just horrid. And after that experience, I remember walking into the board going, that will never happen again.
Yeah.
We are adding more jurors. I'm going to be in control.
So if I'm thinking of the timing correctly, when you took over there, St. Louis had, it was a highly reputable show. It was very competitive to get into. So you didn't have to step in and build up its reputation, but it sounds like you had to really clean up some of the business side of how things were being run.
I had to clean up the business side and maintain the reputation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do things in a more transparent way.
Yeah.
They really didn't communicate with the artists at all. And that was hard for me. I was used to having communication with artists in Uptown a lot. Even just socializing. I was invited to many things. I did Zap demos at different artist parties during the holidays. I mean,
you were really engaged with people. Yeah.
Yeah. And I really thought that was something that was similar to every art festival in the nation. I did not know it was not as...
It was Cindy specific.
Yeah, I was like, whoa, this happens all the time. And there was a lot of cleaning up. There was a lot of, for me, you have a very prestigious show, you have to look prestigious. Ben and Susan, you should tell, when they started this festival, it was all about the art. Mm-hmm. And they pretty much convinced that community it's their festival. And if they don't come, it's going away. And that was probably the most positive thing in the world.
So the community engagement was huge there.
Yeah, you couldn't recreate it. I remember, they had Commerce Bank had a big party for its clients. And Commerce Bank Clayton is in the financial seat of St. Louis. So lots of banks and financial service and wealth management all in that district, with restaurants and a little bit of retail, hotels, the whole thing. But they would invite their top clients to come to the art fair on Friday night. And they would do this rah-rah. But I remember on Friday night coming out the doors, my first art festival, 2009, and looking at Laura, who was my director of operations, and like, what the hell's going on? Why are all these people? We just opened. It was just amazing. And she just looked at me and she goes, wasn't this normal? And I'm like, not really. And she said, oh, it's a big to-do here. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then I would get calls like after the festival where the public would call me and say, hey, I bought a Douglas Sigworth glass piece. What do you think? And so I'm like, and I remember at first I was like, why are they calling me? And I'm like, well, do you like it? And they were like, yes. I said, well, what are you going to do with it? And I would get them to talk about it.
Okay.
And then I would say, yes, I love it. In my first year when the recession was on, 2009, 10, I had people call to say they couldn't come to the art fair and they were sorry that they had no money. And I kept saying, well, it doesn't cost money. You can still come and look at the work and maybe find something in the future. Yeah. And they said, well, I don't want to offend an artist.
Wow.
It was so different from the Uptown experience.
Well, I find that what you're describing is the same kind of feeling I get from the collectors just across the river from there in Belleville, Illinois. It's a very engaged community. Mm-hmm.
And I mean, people really seriously think if they don't show up, the festival's not going to happen. So yeah, it was a real different was a very different experience. I was able to, again, bring in some of the things that I liked. I brought in the open jury to St. Louis, the mock juries. I got to start there. I brought in the emerging artists, kept it to a 2-year program. We did revamp the Creative Castle. And then my last year, we brought in the Student Art Aficionado program. I watched that from Cherry Creek's Kids Buying Art program.
Yeah.
Called Tara up and said, hey, how do you do this? We created our own program. Mm-hmm. So those are the things that was fun. But I wanted to, because I came into St. Louis with no money. I wanted to leave them with money when I left.
Okay.
And so that was my goal. Once I got there and we kept our ranks in the top 10 in the nation. Pretty much we're keeping our jury numbers about the same. Was very transparent about here's the stats. It takes sometimes 7 times to fly before you get in the show. I don't know why. Put them out there. Artists would go, why would you say that? I'm like, I'm being transparent. I'm letting you know.
Some people feel like, well, I've been trying and it must be rigged against me if I can't get in. And you're like, no, it's hard to get in. It's top quality and you need to up your game and keep trying.
That's a 3-day, 10-hour-a-day process of jurying. And yeah, maybe it is too long. I'll be honest. Maybe it is. Yeah, but for your money, they saw you 4 times before they made that choice.
Yeah. Yeah. And the artist feels like they got a fair shot.
Yeah. And that first round, it was 5 no's. Not that many were kicked out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, after, working at Uptown for as long as you did, and then you've worked about that same amount of time at St. Louis. And then I think you created shockwaves through the artist community when they saw the announcement that Cindy Lerick was leaving St. Louis and going to Sausalito. That was like the most shocking thing ever. How did that come about?
It's funny. Sausalito had asked me 3 or 4 times, and I always had an excuse of why not to. Mm-hmm. I probably should have kept that. But
you did it. You did it. It was nagging at you, and you can say, okay, I was right.
I was ready. I had said I was going to leave when I had brought in a title sponsor for multiple years that was going to stay. And I just felt it was time to go for me. I mean, I could have floated, but I'm not a good floater. I'm not a good person who just hangs out. I'm either all in or I'm all out. I don't have this level. Yeah. I don't have that flat level. And so I had accomplished the goals. And I finally went out to Sausalito, and they met my demands, which I didn't think they would.
Demands. It wasn't your negotiating points. It was your demands.
Yeah. Well, it was, hey, here's what I need. Here's what I want. Yeah. And I met them.
Cool.
There's a great book out, the Midnight Library right now. It's all about the Book of Regrets. And I have lived my life like, I don't want to be the Book of Regrets. I don't want to go, God, I woulda, coulda, shoulda. I'm just going to do. And then I always told my interns when they left home or they moved to a new place, I'm like, you can always go home. Minneapolis, Minnesota doesn't close the border. And I keep coming back. Every so often I come back. So I went out there. My vision of what I was going to do and their vision did not meet.
Okay.
The first year was very similar to Uptown. They had told me that this was an agreed upon decision with the previous individual, and it wasn't. So it was not going to work and having fun and enjoying it. It was divisive in terms of none of the volunteers talking to me, none of the staff talking to me.
So you coming in was kind of under duress with some of the people in charge there, or in the decision-making process.
I was brought in by the board and told it was all fine with management and direction show staff.
So this sounds like a repeat. You walk in and get like an eye opener. You might think you're coming in under one pretense, and then you get a whole new awakening.
It was like deja vu.
Oh,
it was really deja vu. And again, I'm in a place where I don't have anybody to, like, I don't have my confidants.
Yeah.
The positive is technology had advanced so much.
Okay, good.
But it was not a great fit.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't. And so went through the show in 17 with very little things to do.
So was that kind of more like you were brought in to kind of like hand it off to you the next year, but you weren't in charge at that point, or what?
I was under the assumption that I would be the executive director and that the individual would be leaving.
And they didn't?
Mm-mm.
Oh.
They had to ask him to leave at the end of the festival.
Okay. Well.
And then we got kicked off of our site at the end of the Bay model told the organization they are never welcome back.
No.
I don't work well being micromanaged.
Okay.
I've realized that finally. I'm not a good person that if I work for a board, you let me do it. You don't tell me how to get it done.
Okay.
And you're not in my space all the time. Even when I was a hygienist, if the dentist came in while I was working, I put my tools down until he left. Like, you can get away. I don't want you telling me what to do. I don't take direction well.
Well, and if you're the executive director, I mean, you're like the top of the chain there. So, I mean, really, it's not a micromanaged position.
I had been working with advisory boards, and this board was a working board who wanted to control, wanted to know the tablecloths, wanted to do this, we have differences in a lot of things. So I got the site. We set up the site. It was a new site. It was different. There were a lot of things I wanted to do. I wanted to drop the artists' fees, let them, if they want, bring in their own tents or rent their own tent and let them set it up. The infrastructure for Sausalito was just for tenting was like $400,000.
Oh, nice.
And they weren't that great tents.
Mm-hmm.
So, they didn't want to do those things. I put in a lot of controls because there was theft going on with alcohol and all this. Anyways, the board and I we weren't on the same page. We did not work well together. I don't know if it was cultural differences. They like to call me doll and honey. I took offense to that.
That's more than cultural. That sounds like there were some other issues going on there.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and it was, I seriously think they thought I would come in and be like the secretary.
Well, maybe they thought by hiring the name Cindy Lerick that just having your presence there would turn things around. And maybe that's more what they were looking for than the actual skills and knowledge that you had to bring to the table.
Yeah. And they, and like I would go through their financials and explain to them this, and they would say, well, where'd you get those figures? And I'm like, out of QuickBooks, out of your accounting systems. I'm not making them up.
Yeah.
Long term. So I had resigned in June 16th of 2018. I was going to go.
So it was a few months before the festival.
Yeah, it was festival's Labor Day. It was 3 months. We had a person there who had been there for 20 years. He kept thinking he could do it all. So I resigned.
Okay.
And I was comfortable with that. And then I came back. I had given him a 2-week notice. And I said, if you want, I can leave tomorrow. It's no big deal. That Monday, I resigned on a Friday. I was flying away for a wedding. And they said, no, we want to talk to you when you get back. And they brought in some heavy hitters and played on my professionalism.
Yeah.
I told them I'll stay through the festival. I'll leave the Tuesday after the Tuesday, the festival's Monday. Tuesday I'll leave and everybody else can take over from there. But I will get you through the festival. Mm-hmm. It was just not a good experience for me personally, professionally, emotionally.
Yeah. Well, you sure had a first happen the week before the show was ready to go. You want to talk about that one?
Yeah. So any festival person out there, risk management 101, I would have never thought my staff would walk out. I'm there the weekend before the festival and I'm there. And the whole month of August, I'm there every day, till 8 or 9. And none of my staff is showing up. And it was culturally, you didn't get to work till 10 and then you went to lunch at 1 and then you came back about 3 and maybe you waited through traffic. It was just weird for me. It was very, it's different, not all, but it was I'm from Minnesota. We get to work on time.
Okay, yeah, it was a very loose schedule for these folks, huh?
And sometimes they didn't show up, didn't call. And so we'd be scheduled to do stuff, and they didn't come in the weekend before the festival. So I texted them saying, hey, I thought we were going to you said you needed help with booth placements. You needed blah, blah, blah. You needed help with signage. Where are you guys? And I had 3 interns, and the interns always showed up. The interns were my little partners in crime, sort of.
Okay.
What it was is I found out they hadn't done anything that they were supposed to do.
Okay.
It was going to be dicey.
It was a matter of time before the proverbial shit was hitting the fan, right? And it just all exploded that Monday before.
The person doing artist relations, she left and never came back.
Oh.
And so that afternoon, Monday afternoon, now we start loading on Wednesday and Thursday. We start loading. It's about 5:00, and all the suits come in and sit down. And I said, my bags are packed. I can leave.
Yeah.
And I said, if you want them back, you can have them.
Right.
But I don't trust them anymore. So they're not coming back for me. It's either them or me. And I don't care what you do. I'm leaving on Tuesday.
Yeah. So it's like you choose door A or door B. You get to live with it. I'll give my all for while I'm here. If you don't want me, I'm done. So take it or leave it.
And they chose me.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. And 3 little interns were sitting outside, working away. And I called them in and I said, here's what's going on. Mm-hmm. There will be no judging. If you don't want to go down this road with me for the next week, I still will write you a great recommendation. And it's funny because these kids they started the day I resigned. So this wasn't news to them. They knew I was leaving after the festival.
Yeah.
And so they sat there for a while, and I said, you don't need to make a decision. I'm going to go take a walk to the site, look around. I'm going to go get a coffee next door. I'll be back in 30 minutes. And if you're ready, you can tell me. And so I came back in. There were 2 boys and a young woman, and they were all holding hands, just shaking. And I'm like, oh God, I don't know how this is.
Yeah, right.
And it was so cute. They're like, we're your team. Oh. And I said, oh my God. And they said, we were wondering how to tell you that they were setting you up. And I said, well, guys, I said, that's okay. We don't need to talk about it. I said, this is what we got.
Yeah.
And we'll get it done. And I said, it's going to be painful. I know it is, and they were moving into the hotel the next day for a week because I always have my site on close to site because they're young kids. And if they're out late and it's just, I don't want to be that person who gets the phone call that someone was in an accident because they were driving home at 3 a.m. This way they were 3 miles from the site.
Yeah.
And then I had some people that I knew in the industry. One I had already hired previous to this to do the food and beverage pieces. Another one, I just called them in and said, here it is. It's not going to be pretty, but let's get it done. And we had a brand new site. We were doing this private concert. We were doing all these weird things.
Well, that was my first time ever doing Sausalito. And honestly, I considered it basically because I knew you were at the head of it. And so I was one of those early birds. I came in on Wednesday. I have this vehicle, that big van and trailer. So I was walking in the middle of your fire, and I had no clue. You did not present a frazzled face. You greeted me. You like, hey, good to see you again. And you could have knocked me over on Sunday about an hour before close when an artist turned to me and said, hey, did you know that the artist relations person walked out a week ago? I'm like, are you kidding me? This whole show is running basically on fumes. How did I not know that we're in turmoil here?
It was the most horrific experience. I literally was wondering if I was going to end up in the loony bin. And I seriously I ended up staying till October, and I had to ask, please let me go.
Well, you said you were leaving on Tuesday. How did you get to still be there till October?
Because there was no staff. Again, they played on my professionalism.
Yeah. You have so much integrity that, I mean, you already said, when you've left when you left Uptown, when you left St. Louis, you needed to feel like you were walking away and it could run itself. It could take care of itself for a while, that you left it in good hands, and you probably just felt like you couldn't live with yourself if you walked away and it wasn't at least, yeah.
And I told them what I thought they should do. They asked me to contract back. I said, no, this is what I said to him. I said, seriously, I think we need a break from each other. It took me a long time to recover. I guess emotionally and professionally, it was one of those that was like, this was hard. It was really, really hard.
It's extreme.
It was.
Hearing you talk about it, it's like actually... It's one of those experiences that, I mean, you lived it, but to get some, perspective, it sounds like a worst nightmare kind of situation that you got through.
And it was so embarrassing because people would come up and say, what happened at Sausalito? Because I guess there was, so many people when I took the job said, if anyone can make changes, you'll be the one. Your personality.
So you feel the pressure. You feel the pressure of having to live up to that.
Well, and there was also that I kind of was this person who could come into new places and maneuver the landscape and kind of go with the flow. And this was just, it was just a situation that was hard. And I remember we had an event closely after with the International Festivals and Events Association, and everyone was coming up and going like, are you ever going to tell us about Sausalito? And I would just smile. And say, because,
and she told everybody right here on The Independent Artist, everyone, thank you very much.
and I had a friend who had been out there, and he was helping me through some stuff out there. And he said, he is pretty normal, flat. And he's like, you guys wouldn't believe it. You wouldn't believe it unless you were there.
Well, so what's next for you? What are you currently working on?
I'm touching base with, I have a few little tiny small clients that are artist based. I've done some teaching. I taught for Temple University, some event operations for small business. I taught for Ohio U as a design event consultant. I don't know. I'm just, something comes up. I know I love the art fair world. I'm still very involved with it, doing things, just helping.
Because you had consulted with St. Louis then after Sausalito. So you're still kind of involved, but on a consulting.
Yeah. I came in as the interim. When I came back, I got a call from St. Louis saying, hey, we know you don't want to live here. And they didn't want to go remote. I said, well, how about we do this? I come every other week and I'm interim, knowing that you're going to hire someone local and I'll work with them. And I'm still working with Sarah a little bit, not as much as I was then. I produced the 2019 show in St. Louis. Like anyone, that was the last show I produced. Like many art fairs. So, yeah, I would go to, if someone had, hey, do you want to be an executive director of an art fair? Do you want to come in as a remote consultant and help us? I would do that. I like that. It's the industry. I like the event industry.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Well, we're gonna have quite a rebound here, quite a moment of having to rebuild after what we've all experienced over the last year. And I believe that your talent and your wisdom and your skill is vital. And yeah, I'm sure that if there's an opportunity for you, somebody's going to call you up and you'll be able to fill that hole.
Yeah, I hope so. There's other things going on. I'm one of those things I do keep busy. I'm doing an online master's program from Falmouth University in the UK on creative event management. So, I'm
nice.
Getting myself out there.
Well, I guess we'll wrap here. I wanted to say to you, honestly, that thinking back over your 25 years, I think I've had the unique pleasure of being involved in every single one of the events that you've run, that you've been the head of over the last, my 20 years. So that 1 year that you were at running Sausalito, I guess I hit it right so that I got to be in every single event. But I just want to say with my experience of you as a director, there was one memory I have when I was signed up to be part of the St. Louis Art Show. And our world was turned completely upside down. And I had to call and I had to basically lay it all on the line, what was going on personally with us. And it was threatening our ability to participate in the show. And I really felt like you held my situation with care and with compassion. You worked with us and you created a viable solution. And that has stuck with me all this time. And I just want to say thank you. And I think the artist community feels that way towards you too, that you really care for us. You really advocate for us. And I am just so grateful that you sat with me and talked through your ups and your downs through the last 25 years. This has been a really great conversation.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate. I've been very, humbled to work with thousands of artists and honored to work with thousands of artists. And I've usually have a very good rapport, but I try to look at situations from two sides, not just mine. With your situation, what I literally did was put myself in your shoes. Yeah. And that's what I did with most of the time. And that's why I used to get so frustrated when I would hear these stories. Well, they couldn't come because of this, so they just canceled. And I'm like, why didn't they call me? And there were some people I have reached out and said, hey, I heard this is going on. Is there a way I can help you get past this?
Yeah.
Because it shouldn't be that way.
Well, and the thing is, in this industry, we lose a show, and you lose a show like St. Louis, for example, that could be a huge portion of your yearly income.
Yeah.
And it isn't just like taking the weekend off of work. It's like taking 6 months off of work or 4 months off of work with no income. So you really understand the weight of it. And all I have to say is, if you are back at the helm of another show, I will apply and sign up in a heartbeat.
Thank you. That's very kind. And that's very nice. I appreciate you saying that. Thank you very much. This has been fun. This has been great. And thank you so much for joining the board. Your voice is really going to help the artist community and help the NAIA with advocacy. And it's just a really good partnership. Yeah, I hope it works out. There's sometimes, because of past situations, sometimes I tread lightly at first and then come in a little bit stronger. But I will probably do that.
You don't want the other shoe to drop and find out, oh boy, here I go again.
And I know, what part of this did I not see? I have sometimes, when I think with my head, it's always wrong. When I think with my heart, it's usually right. And so I can look back at a couple of things and they were, it looks good on paper, but I wasn't listening to my heart. And that's what I need. I know I need to do for me is it's just not a job to me. It's a career and a passion. And that really
comes across in our conversation here. You don't just want to sit on retainer. You want to be involved and have a passionate, involved life.
And I think for anyone, if you were to work with me, if I'm not passionate about it, I'm just like anybody else. I can punch in and punch out and do the bare minimum, but I don't operate well that way. And I know that. So I usually will be the first one to say, this isn't a mix. It isn't working for me. Because that's just how I am. But no, this has been fun. Thank you. It's a beautiful day in northern Minnesota. I'm going to get outside.
All right.
But thank you again for the opportunity. I appreciate this. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Douglas, I really appreciate your interview with Cindy. It's nice to get the other side of that. We had it with Stephen. It was great to talk to another of one of the best in the business. And that's what I think this podcast does.
Yeah. And, at our last NAIA board meeting, one of the things we talked about just how grateful we are to the show directors and to the shows for, making it through. They're in the same position as all of us. We're just trying to get through this really rough year and, providing us with a place and opportunity to sell our work. So we are working as partners here, and we really really appreciate what they've done.
That's one of the things that you talked to Cindy about. She is having a lot of empathy for us. Nice to turn the tables and have some empathy for the people that run the shows that we sell our work at.
Absolutely. Hey, so what do we got coming up next?
Douglas, I have a lot of exciting interviews penciled in, but I don't want to jinx anything since I have not recorded them yet. So
we will be updating our schedule on Instagram and Facebook, so be sure to subscribe and check us out on our social media to find out who's coming up next.
Lots of exciting things. Thanks for tuning in, folks. We'll see you next time. This podcast is brought to you by the National Association of Independent Artists. The website is NAIAartists.org.
Also sponsored by Zapplication. That's zapplication.org. And while you're at it, check out Will's website at willarmstrongart.com and my website at sigworthglass.com.
Be sure to subscribe to this podcast to be notified when we release new episodes.